Welcome back to another episode of Fast Break Up NBA podcast. Your boy Samuel here. I got with me a guest, Nick Andre, my boy from Twitter. He also does some basketball writing and he's also featured on the Unwrapped Sports Network. Nick Andre, say what's up to people.
What's going on, y'all? It's Nick Andre here, basketball writer of all things. And also what Sam said, I'm a part of the Unwrapped Sports Network. And also I'm one of the hosts of the Butter In podcast. So make sure to check us out there.
All right, so definitely do that. And let's also, you want to start with opening night, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so opening night featured two games on TNT, of course. The New Look Nets versus the Golden State Warriors, and then we also had Lakers versus Clippers, giving us another version of the Battle of LA. KD and Kyrie, they looked pretty solid in their debut for the Nets, and they kind of like crushed the Warriors, and the Warriors have some things to work on. What was your main takeaway from that game?
Well, obviously the biggest story was, obviously the debut to Kevin Durant, who was, I think it was like his first game in like about 520 something days. So that was obviously the biggest story there. And to be honest, and I know we're talking about opening night, but I mean, through these two games, he's looked really solid. But to me, it's like, even though like a lot of people are like on the hype that, KD's back, I don't even look at him as 100% back yet. I look at him as like a possible 91, 92%. So obviously he's playing well, but I just feel like, as the season progresses, I feel like he can just take it to another level as soon as he gets legs under him, as soon as he gets comfortable with, attacking and really like doing what KD did in the past before the injury. So obviously, I mean, as the season goes on, he's going to continue to play at a high level. And also Kyrie's been sensational, even with, everybody kind of like going at him and everything with the whole media situation. But, I think the pairing of Kyrie and KD is like the best thing, because even though those two have like bad issues with the media, is like Kevin Durant, no matter what happens, he's gonna make sure to bring it on a nightly basis. And I feel like with Kyrie being able to walk in KD's lead, I feel like he'll be able to bring it too. So I just feel like, with those two being on a roll like they have been over these past two games, it's a scary sight in the Eastern Conference. Now, as far as Golden State, it's obvious that they have some issues going on, but this is basically a brand new team. People don't realize that as well. And also, Steph didn't play most of last year, so it's like Steph is still trying to find his way with the new team as well, with a lot of guys like Eric Paschall, who else could you say, Damian Lee, Jordan Poole, and all these other guys, and also James Wiseman, who's also played well through these first few games. So I think, obviously, we obviously have high expectations on Golden State just because of who they are and what they've been over the past few years. But I think it's going to take a while for them to become accustomed to one another, especially once Draymond comes back. So it'll definitely be like it'll definitely be a little bit of a rough time for Golden State, but I think that they'll figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like what you were saying, a lot of people still have this image of Golden State of like still being the championship favorite, and we got to kind of get that image of Golden State out of our minds, because like you said, it's a whole brand new team, and I think what we're seeing from Steph in these first two games, I know we all know that he plays poorly on Christmas, so that's like one thing that's always remained constant. So I don't even put that Christmas game into perspective. But even just looking back to like the first game and also the games from last year that he played before he broke his hand, he's just trying to figure out how to get these guys into rhythm before he gets himself into anything. And I feel like that's what he's been doing, because like, I don't know if you saw that highlight yesterday from like when he mixed Jrue Holiday. Like he was just showing us some old signs of, he was showing us some signs of like his old stuff. Like he still has it, but he's kind of being a bit reserved, and I don't know if he's fully trusting himself right now. So, and also I think another factor included that a lot of people are still forgetting as well is that he hasn't played in 9 months. And even though he played 9 months ago, it was just one game against the Raptors. And even then, he still hasn't fully brought himself into rhythm. So I think it'll be just a matter of time before he actually fully ingratiates himself within the offense of this team with this new cast of characters, as well as just finding his shot again as well. So I think there's nothing to really make a big deal out of with Steph. A lot of people, they want to see Steph fail so bad because their teams have been crushed by him in the past, and like
Right.
yeah, they just want to latch onto some bit of like failure from him and just tear him down from that. But I have a feeling like midway through the season we'll see a brand new version of Steph, and everybody will have their mouth shut by then.
Right. And I also want to point out, I feel like now with this new season for Golden State, and especially with Clay not being able to play this season, now it's a challenge as far as like which wing player will we see step up right next to Steph? Will it be Andrew Wiggins, who we've like, who has obviously not played up to his expectations, but people still have high optimism of him? Or will it be Kelly Oubre, who showed a lot of emergence last season and is also looking to carry that over into the Bay Area? So even though, like, for those two, it hasn't been a solid 2 games for them. Well, obviously, as a team, it hasn't been a solid 2 games for them. But it'll be interesting to see which one of those guys will be able to step up in that wing position right next to Steph. Because I feel like it takes a lot of pressure off Steph when one of those guys are getting going. When Oubre is firing, it takes a lot of pressure off Steph. And you can tell through the first 2 games that, with them not being able to take that game to that next level, that, Steph is obviously going to see double, triple teams. But I feel like with another guy being able to score on a consistent basis, that's going to help like really good for Steph and the Warriors.
Yeah, because when those guys aren't hitting shots, the defense is not even obligated to even pay them any mind. Like we see Andrew Wiggins, the jury has been out on Andrew Wiggins for a while of him being a good player, because like everyone just sees him like, oh, he's a 20 point per game loser, basically. That's what he's been known as since his Minnesota days. So like a lot of people had this high optimism of him coming to Golden State in absorbing the winning culture and hopefully developing some good habits, but he just seems to fall right back into the same Andrew Wiggins of old. And it's just so frustrating because you have so much. He's someone that's so talented, and then he just limits himself to just playing basketball in this undesirable, unappealing way. And to be honest,
I feel like it's a mixture of both. I feel like it's a mixture of, him allowing everyone to get to his head, because I don't know how often he's on social media, but if he does go on social media, then he sees that everybody's like kind of talking mess about him. And then it's also, I just feel like he just has to like, just go out there and play, like, play your game. Like, we know you're talented. We know that you can score the basketball. We know how athletic you are. Just go out there and play. And I feel like if he just like puts everything to the side and just plays his basketball, it'll allow him to be successful in Golden State. Golden State's one of the most unselfish teams. Steph Curry is one of the most unselfish superstars. He could play off the ball. He doesn't have to have the ball in his hands throughout the 24 seconds in the shot clock. So I just feel like if Andrew Wiggins really wants to, and if he really wants to make that effort, just go out there and play, no matter what the circumstances.
yeah, I definitely agree, and I hope over the course of the season, having someone like Draymond out there on the court with him will definitely help his game, because I know Draymond usually just he opens up the offense and he finds players in their spots when they need the ball the most. So
Facts.
hopefully when Draymond gets back, that he'll be able to help Andrew Wiggins settle into his game a bit more, and hopefully they can start to win some games, because it's been off. They've been off to a rough start. They lost the Christmas Day game also, but one bright spot has been James Wiseman. I know a lot of draft Twitter was actually basically down on him being such a highly touted prospect, because I think it was a mixture of multiple factors of like lack of game tape of him against like good competition, as well as like how he looked in the past. So they didn't know what to really expect from him, and they thought he was going to be really raw. And he is still really raw, but he still actually looks pretty good. So how do you feel about James Wiseman so far?
I've liked James Wiseman for a while now. And I mean, I can understand it with the fact that, he didn't play only but about six games playing in Memphis. But even in those 6 games, he pretty much dominated the floor. I mean, he shows good footwork in the post. He's able to get to his spots and elevate. So I feel like honestly, like when going into the draft, I wanted the Warriors to get Wiseman. Like, I didn't want them to grab a guy like LaMelo and possibly Anthony Edwards when they really needed a big who could come out there and dominate. And I just feel like, Wiseman can be the future of the Warriors, even past Steph and Clay and Draymond, like going forward. It's all about how much he develops, how much he continues to emerge as a player, and how well, saying like the system of Steve Kerr can like help him be able to become more of a factor as a big man.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really worked in his favor is the jump shot. I know a lot of people had their doubts about the jump shot if it was something consistent, and so far it's looked actually really solid.
It has.
It's a bit slow, but like it doesn't matter when you're 7'1" because like no one can basically block it. So
exactly. That has also been a surprise for me because I didn't really see much of that when he was at Memphis, and then in that first game against Brooklyn, I think he knocked down like 2 or 3 in a row, and it was like, oh shoot, like if this guy can really stretch the floor like this, sooner or later he'll be the best big man in the game, hands down.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's definitely got to work on the defense a bit because I noticed that he's a little bit foul prone, but I think that's just a lack of game reps.
It could be, yeah.
Now on to the second game of opening night. We had the Battle of LA again. Lakers versus Clippers. Paul George looked actually really good in this game. I think he finished with like 33 points. He's rocking the braids. The jump shot looks smooth. And the Clippers came out with a win again, just like last year, but we can't take much from it because we saw things crumbled in the playoffs for the Clippers, but some things have changed for the Clippers. They added Kennard, Ibaka, Batum. Batum actually looks like a decent player now.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you take away from that? From the Lakers Clippers game and just like their performance overall?
It's kind of weird because I was really impressed with the way Paul George and the Clippers did play because Paul George really came out and had a chip on his shoulder from start to finish. But I'm also not too impressed by it just because, I mean, when you look at from the Lakers side, the Lakers just kind of show that, they didn't really care about this game. They were just coming off getting their rings. And it was like, they were a bit sluggish to start the game, even though they did make a run, like a small run within like the second and third quarter to make a comeback. But you could just tell like their minds was not really into the game. LeBron played decent, but it's not up to LeBron's standards. Same thing with Anthony Davis. And then it's also a mixture of them just trying to bring in the new guys and trying to help them get comfortable. But besides that, I mean, it was an impressive game from the Clippers, particularly Paul George. So now it's all about how he continues to go forward this season, playing at a high level. Because I mean, we've heard him on All the Smoke saying that he's gotten back to training with the guy that he trained with during his MVP season. Now he doesn't have Doc Rivers with him, and now I think Tyler's really giving him that opportunity to play his style of basketball, and you could tell it's made a big difference. So it's just all about how much he plays at a high level throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, Ty Lue has definitely empowered him on offense, allowing him to play with the ball more in his hands, and that's something he said he wanted to do. He said that Doc Rivers used him more of as a Ray Allen or like a JJ Redick, setting like pin downs for him, which is kind of to Paul George's benefit because when you look at the numbers, he actually performs better, or like the numbers at least say that he performs better when he comes off pin downs because he's actually a good spot shooter.
Right.
So it wasn't really such a bad thing. I think he just wanted the ball more in his hands so he could decide how he dictates where his offense comes from instead of the offense dictating it for him, which I understand to a degree, but it's like Doc Rivers is also putting you in the best position for yourself. Well, we'll see how it plays on to as the season goes on. Hopefully he can continue to perform at a consistent level and it continues throughout the playoffs because that's the one thing that has been a knock on him the last couple of years, at least, is that he doesn't do it when it matters the most. So hopefully that can continue.
That's a fact for sure. And also, I mean, just kind of going back to like how the Clippers played last season. So I can understand it from Paul George's perspective, like his frustration, especially coming off of that MVP caliber season in OKC, where he was basically the leading guy right beside Russell Westbrook as far as offensively. And then you're coming into a new environment, which you feel like it is the best position to win a championship. But then you're also teaming up with Kawhi Leonard, who was coming off of a ring as well. And we know how much Kawhi is so great, being in isolation and kind of like, being around that block area with the ball in his hands. So I guess it might have been kind of difficult for Doc to, to kind of like have both of those guys play with the ball in their hands and like kind of with ball movement and everything, trying to keep that going. But throughout these first two games, Ty Lue kind of made it work. You know, Kawhi's played pretty well. Paul George has continued to play well. So if those two can continue to like kind of like play their style of the game, but also keep the team going, I think it's a good sight to see.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed from the Clippers as well is that the ball movement is like really, really flowing, and they're really pushing the pace when they get like rebounds or turnovers, and they're always looking for opportunities in transition. I think that's something that they didn't do as much last year, especially shoot threes, considering that the people that they had on their teams that could shoot threes. But they really look like they're pushing the volume on the threes a bit more, which is good to see because you can never go wrong with making more threes at least.
Right. And I think the one thing that the Clippers possibly need, and hopefully they can grab it like during trade deadline, which I mean I know a lot of people have said, I really want them to have a floor general at that point guard position that could play alongside Kawhi and PG. I really wanted them to grab Rondo in free agency, but unfortunately that didn't happen. And as much as I love Pat Beverly, he's a pest on the defensive end, but he's just not that guy that's gonna set guys up, and really run the floor as far as like being a point guard wise. So if they could possibly grab something like that, I mean, Reggie Jackson can run that full general position, but he just hasn't really shown it to me since he got to the Clippers. But if they can grab a guy that can like really run the floor and really put Paul George and Kawhi at their spots and in the best position to score, then I feel like the Clippers will be even more dangerous going into the playoffs this year.
Yeah, that's one thing that they really lacked, and I thought they were gonna make a move at in free agency for at least like because I know there was some rumblings of like a Terry Rozier trade possibly. That didn't happen, and of course the Rondo thing was a thing that was going around as well. So it was kind of disappointing. With Pat Beverly, yeah, he's not necessarily the guy that you want setting guys up. He's great on the defensive end at being a pest, like you said. And Reggie Jackson, yeah, I was never really the biggest fan of Reggie Jackson because like I feel like he doesn't make like he'll make one good move and then he'll follow it up with like three bad moves. Like he'll have a turnover, he'll take a shot early in the shot clock that didn't need to be taken, and like he just does some unnecessary stuff sometimes. So I just don't think, and I've seen Kawhi get frustrated with him multiple times. So I didn't even think they were going to bring him back, to be honest, when talking about Reggie Jackson.
Yeah, you kind of tell that it has been kind of an adjustment, and I agree with you. He has taken some shots to me that I'm kind of like that's kind of like not a good look, and you could tell it did kind of frustrate guys like Kawhi and Paul George, especially like like you said earlier in the shot clock. I remember in the bubble when Kawhi went up to Paul George, or no, not Paul George, to Reggie Jackson. Kawhi went up to him, and then I think he said something to him, or kind of like in frustration. So it's just all about, like I said, it's just all about trying to find a guy that could really be that point guard for the team. Because right now, it's like, who do you have running the floor on offense? It's like, you don't really have a real floor general on the team. So that's what I feel like can really benefit them in going into the playoffs.
Definitely. So then going into the next couple games, I guess we can go into Tuesday. What was it? No, Wednesday's games. Um, Boston versus Milwaukee. That was an interesting game. I thought it was going to be a blowout, and then, of course, Milwaukee came back and made it close.
Right.
JT and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, wing duo. I mean, what more can you say about their games and the way they complement each other? It's going to be really tough to see how they continue to keep up on offense and shot creation opportunities without Kemba on the court because Jeff Teague and Peyton Pritchard minutes, I mean, they looked rough on that Christmas game against the Nets when it was just like Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown by themselves out there. So, but yeah, Giannis and Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday really look like a big three that game. Like they really all brought it. They really all brought it on the offensive end and defensively as well. I think they all scored like 25 plus. So I mean, if they can do that in like playoff games when it really matters, I mean, down the road, that's when it'll really see that this trade paid dividends. So how did you feel about that game?
It was a fun game to watch to me. I mean, even though like I did miss most of the first quarter because I was busy, but just kind of besides that, Boston obviously like really took control. Tatum looked pretty well, even though Tatum didn't really shoot like a higher percentage, but he was really getting into his spots. Jaylen Brown, I don't know why, I just feel like he was like the most underrated part of this game because he really played fantastic on both ends of the floor. And as far as Milwaukee's side, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think Giannis, Chris Middleton, Andrew Holiday could really be a big three if they can all stay consistent. And throughout these two games, Chris Middleton's looked pretty good. I'll admit that. And I know that we've all been critical of him, especially in the playoffs. When he hasn't played up to his standards. But to start the season, he's really been shooting the ball pretty well. And to be honest, I really hope that he continues to keep it up going forward because I really feel like that's just really crucial for Milwaukee this year. And then also another guy like Dante DiVincenzo, who played well, had 15 points that night, which I'm really happy for him because I'm happy that he's finally really like showing the opportunity. He had some good stretches last year, but I just feel like he wasn't really getting as much of an opportunity as he is so far this year. So yeah, kudos to him. But it really just all came down to like, Giannis was missing that last free throw. And it's like, with the game on the line, especially with no fans to distract you in that arena, it's like, you definitely have to convert on that free throw. And that's definitely something that he needs to think about going forward and like hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always concerned me about Giannis is the free throw shooting because like the form looks. I thought he changed it at first because I saw during the preseason he was like tinkering around with it a little bit and the form did look a bit different. But then he reverted back to his old form. So I don't know if he's planning to change it long term. I do like to see the progression with the jump shots. I know it started off early last year like that too. So and then it tailored off towards the end again. Hopefully he can keep that consistent because if he's hitting threes, then he's really a problem for the defense, and they can't really wall up against him. But I would like to see Giannis develop that mid post game a little bit more and add some more moves in his repertoire down there. Because then once he gets down there, it's hard to stop him in the post because he's powerful, and if he has those moves, then he can counter the defense, and they can't just build the walls up. So I would like to see an improvement there with Giannis.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, throughout the first two games, he has kind of shown like kind of like some moves on the block and during the mid range. I've seen him make a few turnaround jumpers from time to time in that Boston game. So yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean this has honestly been like the biggest concern with Giannis is being a perimeter scorer. We know how dominant he is getting to the basket. We know how dominant he is on the defensive end, and that's what makes him him. But I feel like in order for him to take his game to that next level and also for Milwaukee to go to that next level is for him to have that jump shot. And we saw that last year in the bubble when they played Miami, when he got on the block and then, next thing you know, Miami trapped him and then it forced him into like a bad possession. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely all about him getting into like a good spot on the perimeter and him just going to work offense. I mean, he's shown that he can make a three. He's shown that he can make the mid-range shot, but it's got to be on a consistent level. And that's obviously the biggest concern with Giannis so far. And it definitely needs to be an improvement as the season goes on.
Yeah. Another game featured on national TV for Wednesday was Suns versus Mavericks. We got our first look at Devin Booker and Chris Paul. And we also got our first look at Doncic without Porzingis and this little bit of a new look squad. They did shuffle some role player pieces during the offseason. But having Devin Booker and CP in the clutch is just unfair to me. I mean, we saw those two last year, what they did in the clutch on their own respective teams. Two of the most clutch players, scorers. They just dictate the pace of the game at the end of the game. Chris Paul and Devin Booker, both masters of the mid-range, underrated parts of their game. And it was just fun to see that duo just like take over the end of that game. Like they both didn't have the best game up until that point, but when it came down to like time for business, time to close the game down, they did what needed to be done, and they got the job done. So how'd you feel about that game?
I liked it from start to finish, to be honest. And I mean, like you said, I mean, Booker had a solid first half, but I mean, I think kind of like in the second half, I think he just kind of like got kind of cold and stopped being as assertive as he once was. But like you said, I mean, as soon as clutch time came around, I mean, that was when those two kind of rose to the occasion, and that's definitely going to be something that they're going to have to do in order for Phoenix to get through, especially a lot of tough teams out in the West. I mean, even though Dallas hasn't really looked up to par over these past 2 games, especially with the loss to Porzingis, but having Luka Doncic on your squad automatically makes you like a threat. So for CP3 and Devin Booker and also DeAndre Ayton and a lot of those guys just being able to come up in those big situations throughout the game, it really shows like what kind of team that they can be. Now, as far as Dallas, I really hope that Porzingis comes back soon, because I don't know the timetable on his return exactly, but they've really struggled over the past few games. I mean, I just feel like I feel like the lack of like that size underneath is really giving them problems. And I know Dwight Powell's a good, solid player, even though he is coming off of his injury. But I just feel like Porzingis just helps him elevate to that next level of contention as the season goes around. So Luka's been playing really well. Tim Hardaway Jr.'s played pretty well. I like the signing of Josh Richardson, and then also other guys like Finney Smith and other cats. But Porzingis, I think the loss of Porzingis is really like taking a toll on him, and I feel like his presence is deeply missed.
Well, I mean, as a Knicks fan, just to like speak briefly, I'm like Dallas. They couldn't keep stinking it up because we own their pick this year, and I would just love for another lottery pick. I would just love for another lottery pick in this loaded draft class. So I do not mind Dallas stinking it up. Luka Doncic, I will say though, he's not in shape. Like that's something that's evident right now. Like I think he'll play. Go ahead.
I want to say he's also injured as well. I think he injured. Didn't he injure that? I think it was like his left foot or something like that in the Phoenix game.
He did. He did turn his ankle in the Phoenix game. Yeah, he did.
So maybe that could play a huge role. But I mean, I do agree with what you're saying though as well. I mean, Luka's looked rather slow to begin the season off as well.
And I hope he's not one of those guys that like comes into camp out of shape, knowing that he could play himself into shape, because it doesn't do yourself any justice in the Western Conference to start off slow, because as you see from years past, teams that start off slow, I mean, it doesn't benefit them when it comes playoff times, because sometimes those playoff spots are determined by those 1 or 2 games that you not taking that seriously in the beginning of the year. And in a shortened season, that could mean a lot with the 72 games now.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you honestly kind of like hit the nail right on there. Like, I mean, especially being in the Western Conference, it's important for these teams like Dallas, Phoenix, and like the rest of these guys that are like probably not as far as contention like the Lakers and Clippers and Nuggets and all the other teams, but just being around like that 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th seed, it really helps, just being able to play every game like it's crucial. Because I mean, here's the thing, like the West is that conference where it's like you could be like in the 4th, 5th seed, and then you lose that one game, and the next you're down to like the 8th or 9th seed. So every game is really crucial, especially with how deep it is. So it'll definitely be important to see how Dallas comes back from that loss against the Lakers on Christmas and see where they can go going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Next game I do want to talk about, or not even next game, but like some brief notes from other games that happened across the league. Jamal Murray, the bubble's not here this time, and Jamal Murray's looking a bit rough around the edges to start the season so far. I know a lot of people are expecting him to make this jump into like the top 5 point guard conversation, but we may need to hold off on it, because I think Jamal Murray is showing us that this is who he really is, which I always knew who he was like an inconsistent guy, and he'll average maybe a calm 19, but he isn't giving you like the 27 points per game that he gave us in the playoffs on the crazy efficiency that he did, which is okay, but like the recency bias I saw on Twitter was just like ridiculous with people talking about him over like other established guards in the league that have been doing this consistently. So how do you feel about Jamal Murray's rough start?
I will admit I have been like, I'm very guilty of that, because about a few weeks ago, I wrote an article just kind of debating like whether like that bubble experience kind of made him a top 5 point guard in the league. But I'll agree with you, man. I mean, he has not looked good to start this season, and I guess the bubble does have something to do with people how players are playing well. Because Dame hasn't played well either to start the season as well. And
Yep.
I guess maybe just like I guess they got so accustomed to like that type of atmosphere where it's like now they have to adjust like kind of back to how things used to be. But I mean, you also have to give credit to Sacramento as well. Sacramento didn't allow things to get easy for them, and they ended up going away with the win. So it's definitely important for Murray to play well throughout the season, especially being right next to Jokic. Because here's the thing: if Murray's not playing well, then I personally don't see Denver getting to another Western Conference Finals, or even like possibly trying to get to the finals. So it's definitely up for Murray to continue to like improve as a player, and also just like take that next step throughout the rest of this season in order for the Denver to get by.
Yeah, a lot of this hinges on Murray's development just as a consistent player, because as you can see with the bubble, the thing was it was a consistent environment. And guys like Murray who are like streaky, they need like something consistent to like make sure that nothing affects their game, such as like travel. A lot of people mention the depth of perception with no crowd. It changes when you're looking at the rim and stuff like that. So they got used to it over those 2 months, and it really changed things for a lot of these guys. I mean, even Tyler Hero, who was going nuts in the playoffs in the bubble, not looking so good to start this year off so far. Just a lot of change. It's back to the way things were before. Like a lot of people underestimated the factors of travel and just the overall schedule and wear and tear of the season. So I think that we're going to see a lot of these bubble performances be kind of nullified basically by going back to normal this year.
Yeah, definitely. And it's crazy how you look back at like how good the players really had it, because the thing like right after right after each game, like you were able to recover like really quick. Like, what I'm saying? You didn't have to like deal with travel, like you said. You didn't have to like deal with, other things of that nature. So players were playing at a very high level because of that, and were able to benefit off of it. But the thing is now is that now that things are back to normal, which players wanted, because a lot of players really hated the bubble. Now it's all about, how you can take your experience from the bubble onto, back to what it used to be, playing in the arenas and everything. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Jamal Murray is that kind of player where I do feel like he will come back and play at a high level, even though it has kind of like been a rocky start throughout the first few games of the season. But I feel like with just the kind of player that he is, I feel like he'll be able to bounce back. And also, I mean, players like Jokic and Coach Mike Malone, I just feel like they won't tolerate, just bad play out of Murray. So it'll be interesting to see like how he elevates his game going forward.
Yeah. And then, so speaking of the Sacramento Denver game, that was a crazy ending with the Buddy Hield tip in. I know a lot of people hoping that Sacramento can somehow make a leap into the playoffs. I know this year is a really tough year in the West with the amount of teams that are supposed to be good at least, but a lot of them have started off rough. So maybe Sacramento can slip themselves in somewhere. Trae Young has been crazy to start this season. I mean, just like an hour before we started recording, he just finished a game where he had like 36 against the Grizzlies, and he had like 37 against the Bulls in a blowout. So he's off to a great start this year as well. So how you feeling about Trae Young and Atlanta's at least chances of a playoff spot this year? So far they're 2-0, I think.
Yeah, they're 2-0, and honestly, I mean, Trae Young has played well, and obviously, I mean, he's gonna have to continue to play at that high level in order for Atlanta to get by. But as far as the Hawks, I feel like they have the right pieces around them to possibly land a 7th, 8th seed. I mean, and obviously that's also because of how much weaker the Eastern Conference is. Even though the East has gotten better this year, but they're not what the West is. And I mean, the West is just so deep; they're like 12 teams deep, so it's crazy. But I think the signing of Bogdanovich, grabbing him really helps, and also not to mention Rondo as well. And also, I feel like Clint Capella is going to be a really great enforcer under the basket for Atlanta moving forward into the season. I feel like he's going to take a lot of pressure off of John Collins being that big man, and it'll allow John Collins to really play his game on offense, to be able to really stretch the floor like he's known to be. So as far as Atlanta, I really like their chances as far as making the playoffs. And as long as Trae Young is averaging around the numbers that he did last year, it could definitely happen.
Yeah, for sure. Um, ooh, let me see. Um, so Trey does definitely look solid. And speaking of the Grizzlies, John Morant's been cooking to start the year, and I feel like he's gonna have to continue to perform at such a high level because he's missing Jaren Jackson Jr. and Justice Winslow to start the year. Brandon Clark's jumper looks all messed up now,
It
and
is. Ugh.
yeah, the form look. I don't know what happened, who worked with him this off season, but that's just a mess. But John Morant's been solid. 44 points on their opening night versus the Spurs. On really high efficiency. And then today he followed it up with, I believe it was like a 26-point game, 7 assists. So I mean, him and Ja, him and Trey, they're the future of the point guard position in this league, and so far they really lived up to it to start the season.
Yeah, definitely. Jaw just continues to amaze me, and it's not about like the way he's scoring, but it's his efficiency that's really getting to me. I want to say he shot 47-48% last year. I looked at the numbers a few days back, and he's also starting this year shooting the ball well as well. And I mean, just watching this Hawks game tonight, it really shows like when you give Jaw a little bit of space, he's going to take advantage of it, and he did that for the most part against the Hawks. I mean, especially when he was going up against guys like Kevin Huerter, Trae Young, those guys being able to defend them. But like you said, I mean, Memphis is going to have a really tough time, especially with the loss of Jaren Jackson Jr. and Justice Winslow. But I want to personally see a little bit more from Dylan Brooks, guys like of that nature. Kyle Anderson played pretty well tonight against the Hawks.
Yeah, he
so
did.
it's definitely all about like who's going to be that next man for alongside John Morant. And obviously, like I said, I mean, the loss of Jaren Jackson Jr. really does hurt, but it's all about what will we get from Dylan Brooks on a consistent basis? I mean, and also guys like Brandon Clark, whose jump shot looks awful, but I still feel like there could be a chance that he could come up big in big situations, and also guys like Valanciunas as well. So, Jaw looks pretty good to start the season, but it's all about who's going to be that next man right next to him to start the season.
Yeah, definitely. Another key performance to start off the year. Speaking of the sophomores this year, RJ Barrett had a solid game against the Pacers. Finished with like 26, 8 and 5. Started off the game, I think it was 9 for 9 and 3 for 3 from 3-point land. So hopefully RJ can continue to put up these type of numbers and hopefully lead to some type of wins, because a lot of people were down on him after just one half of preseason against the Pistons, calling him a bust and saying he's one of the worst lottery picks. So I would just hope, not even just as a Knicks fan, but just as like someone who likes to see the young guys thrive, but just like I would just like to see him continue to put these type of numbers up, because it just shows the furtherment of his development. So I don't know if you got to see any of the highlights or from that game. So how do you feel about RJ in general, at least?
Yeah, to be honest, I want to say I saw a little bit of the highlights on TV, and I mean, honestly, before we started this, I kind of forgot that they even played the Pacers that night. But I've been telling people to just stay patient with RJ. RJ shows that he could be a very valuable player, and I feel like he's so lethal on the floor. He could play like almost any position. I mean, and honestly, we saw that at Duke when he was playing alongside Zion Williamson, and just how much he was able to really take over most of those games, in college. And I feel like he could do the same thing for the Knicks as well, especially hopefully Coach Thibodeau will really look at him and be like, okay, this is your team. You should be able to, create on your own, be able to just kind of like take over the game whenever you can. Because I mean, RJ is such a phenomenal player where it's like I feel like he's capable of doing things like that. And I mean, I know that his jump shot can be a little bit of an adjustment. I mean, I feel like there are times where where he does shoot the ball and he's like, it doesn't seem like he's so confident in the shot that he took. But I just feel like with a little more development and a little more experience, I feel like that could possibly be something that he could overcome. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the Knicks honestly they don't have a bad team to me. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I, honestly, I know people like, like to trash him and everything. But the thing is, like, Mitchell Robinson, I like Mitchell Robinson. He's a really good player. I like Obi Toppin, even though I didn't expect him to go to the Knicks. He's a solid player. Guys like Emmanuel Quickly and, another cat. So the Knicks don't have a bad roster. I mean, they are relatively young, but it's just all about, how well they're coached and how and who's going to be that guy to take it to the next level, which I expect RJ Barrett to be.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I actually feel confident in the coaching staff that we have here for the Knicks, because I was never confident in David Fizdale. I wasn't a fan of Jeff Hornacek, at least for our roster when we had him. Who was the other coaches that we had? I liked Mike Miller, but I didn't think he was supposed to be here long term. He was the guy after Fizdale.
Right.
But this is the first time I actually have confidence in the coaching staff, because for the first time ever, we hired a development staff, which we never had before, surprisingly. And I just feel like Thibodeau is someone who's just gonna get on these guys more. I mean, as we've seen so far, in even preseason games, they're up by like 40 in one preseason game. They made like a bad defensive play and he called a timeout to like just get on them about it. So, I mean, like that's the type of coaching that leads to like building a winning culture and developing your young guys in the right habits. So I feel like if they continue on that route, I feel like the season, even if whatever losses that we have, I feel like that will make for a good season regardless.
Yeah, definitely.
The Wizards, I like how they looked in their first game with Russell Westbrook, Beal, Bertans, Denny, all those guys. I mean, I feel like they have a solid chance at being a playoff team. How do you feel about the Wizards?
Definitely. I see them being a 6th seed if everything goes right, because, I mean, we saw what Bradley Beal was able to do last year, basically without a point guard. Well, as far as like, a high caliber point guard being right next to him, and he averaged 30 games. So I feel like playing alongside Russell Westbrook will really help him be able to continue that high level play and also possibly elevate going forward. And as far as like the Wizards roster, I really like I like Denny being that player for the second unit, because I feel like with his ability to facilitate and score, I just feel like it takes that second unit to another level. And just looking at that first game for the team, I mean, you could tell like Russ was really trying to get into his own. He was pretty much controlling the pace of the game. But I just feel like with a little more experience, if the team had a little bit more experience together, I feel like they probably would have been able to close that game out against Philadelphia. So yeah, I mean, Russ is going to continue to be Russ. Hopefully, Bradley Beal will continue to emerge as an all-star in this league, and continue to develop. And also, I mean, the rest of the team like Bertans and Rui and all these other guys can continue to play at a high level as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was at first when the trade happened, I kind of clowned the trade a little bit because I was like, "Yeah, you're trading like a tangerine for an orange," like basically saying like Russ and John Wall were like the same player. And with Russ, you have something
I
that's
was definitely on that wave.
Yeah, with Russ, you have something more of a sure thing because he's someone that's actually played in the last 2 years. As with John Wall, I mean, we're still waiting for his debut, his regular season debut at least, because of the whole situation with the Rockets and their quarantine situation. So John Wall is someone who hasn't played in 2 years, and you don't know what you're getting with him necessarily. With Russ, you're getting someone who's more of a sure thing, and you know Russ will do whatever it takes to get his team to the playoffs, at the very least. And then you pair that with Bradley Beal and all the shooting that they have, it just makes for a solid recipe for a team that can make it to the playoffs. I don't think they'll get far in the playoffs, but I think they'll make it there.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, just looking at the East, I mean, the only teams that I could possibly see ahead of them is obviously Brooklyn, obviously Milwaukee, Boston, Philadelphia, and possibly maybe Toronto. It's kind of like, especially with the loss of Gasol and Ibaka, is like, where do you see Toronto placing in the Eastern Conference? So I feel like the Wizards and the Raptors could possibly be fighting for like that 5th, 6th spot in the East, but it's all about, which team really emerges throughout the rest of the year. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the game, I like Russ on this team. I feel like Russ is really going to help this team thrive as a collective, especially with the leadership that he has and him being able to like really run the floor and being able to find open guys. So yeah, it'll be definitely interesting to see like where this Wizard team goes. I mean, he's reunited with Scott Brooks, and he had a lot of success under him. So it's definitely going to be a good thing for Washington throughout the season.
Yeah, for sure. And now let's move on to the Christmas Day games. The first game of the day. I mean, how did you feel about the Christmas Day slate in general? Because I know everybody was like down on it because it was like this is probably one of the worst Christmas Day schedules that we had in a while.
I'm not necessarily mad at it. I just wish that all of the games would have probably been a little bit more competitive. And obviously you can't really help that, especially when one team is like playing exceptionally well, and then the next team is just kind of playing like bled. But I mean, to be honest, it wasn't a bad schedule. I mean, obviously, like the first game, Zion. Everybody wants to see Zion, and then also you have the Miami Heat who are coming off of a finals appearance, and then you have Milwaukee the next game who have the best record in the league, and then you have the Warriors playing them, who everybody's excited to see Steph, and they were excited to see Clay, even though Clay wasn't able to play. And then the next game you have KD playing in his return, him alongside Kyrie, and then you're also playing a Boston team with Tatum and Brown and all the rest of those guys, and then of course LeBron and Luka, and then again Jokic, Murray against Kawhi and PG. So I mean, it's overall it was a pretty good schedule. I mean, I can understand where people were, but I wasn't too mad at it.
Yeah, the schedule in general, at first when I first saw it, I was like, there could be a couple of good games from this. But then as the day went on, like it just devolved into like blowout after blowout after blowout. And I know this was not what Adam Silver had in mind, because like he really wanted this schedule to be up. He really wanted the NBA to come back in time so that way we could have Christmas Day games. And it just devolved into 5 games that no one really wanted to sit through the end of. I mean, there's not much to really take from these games, but I did notice some things, like from the Heat and Pelicans game. The Pelicans really have bad spacing, and Eric Bledsoe just looks awful. Like, I don't know how the Bucks, I don't know how Giannis did it. All those last 2 years, I don't know how he did it with Eric Bledsoe, but Eric Bledsoe just did not look like a basketball player against the Pelicans. I mean, against the Heat.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, like, I was kind of scratching my head when Milwaukee traded Bledsoe or made Bledsoe a part of that deal to get Jrue Holiday. And to be honest with you, man, I don't expect Eric Bledsoe to even be with this team like after the trade deadline. I feel like they'll possibly ship him elsewhere. But I kind of agree with you, man. I just feel like, with Bledsoe's inability to shoot the basketball on a consistent level, it does like lack the empathy of spacing. And to be honest, like when I look at New Orleans, I mean, I honestly look at them as like a pretty decent spacing team, especially when you have a guy like JJ Redick. You have other guys like, I mean, George Hill is able to shoot the rock. Lonzo hasn't been the best of shooters, but over the past few years, he has shown to be a good shooter. But the one takeaway that I had from like the Pelicans as far as this game is that Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson is destined to be a really good duo if everything goes well. I mean, I want to say Zion had about like 30 or so, and then Brandon Ingram had about like 28. And for the most part, they look pretty good, but it's like, it's also crazy because Miami is just a really good team. Duncan Robinson pretty much led the team for most of the night. Jimmy Butler has some good moments, and other guys as well. But yeah, I mean, the one takeaway that I did have from that game is that the fact that Zion and Brandon Ingram could really be like a deadly duo if everything goes right, if everybody could just stay healthy.
Yeah, I do like that duo, and I felt like Ingram should have finished with at least some more points because he had 28 through 3, and then I don't know what happened in that fourth quarter, but it feels like they kind of froze him out, and the ball just kind of went straight to Zion, which I kind of understand, but Ingram had the hot hand, so I would figure that they would try to get him going a bit more. But yeah, that is a duo to see for years to come. With Zion, though, defensively, he does have some things to work on. He looks lost out there at times. I don't know if it's just a lack of game reps because, he did start off late in the season last year. So I don't know if it's that. But, yeah, he just looks a bit lost out there defensively. Like, he also looks a bit stiff. I don't know if that will change throughout the flow of the regular season. But yeah, I thought that his game was still pretty impressive. I mean, he just kept getting to the rim. They couldn't stop him. And when something like that just keeps working for you, just keep doing it. So, yeah, he did finish with I think it was 32 points. So, yeah.
Yeah, Zion. I think what needs to happen is that I think Stan is really gonna have to like make some like defensive sets where Zion could really be like a force under the basket. Because I mean, with a guy of his size, I mean, he can pretty much dominate anybody or like kind of stop anybody with that size and that athleticism. And also, I mean, just pairing him alongside Steven Adams under the basket, I just feel like that's a recipe for disaster for a lot of teams defensively. Just with their ability, with their strength and their IQ for the game. So it'll be interesting to see like the adjustment that Stan makes, on the defensive end. Because I mean, this I like just looking at the roster, this team is pretty solid defensively.
Yeah. And another observation that I saw from this game is Precious Achua is gonna. That was a solid find for Miami. I thought that he was gonna be like a late first round, maybe second round pick, but they picked him at like I think pick 20 it was in the first round, and he's already part of the rotation. Also a note is Kendrick Nunn is not in the rotation right now, so that's something that's very interesting. So, but Precious Achua was a solid find for them. Defensively, he gives them like some length, and he's able to guard a little bit on the perimeter, and he gives them some energy in transition. So that is one of my main takeaways from that Miami game.
Yeah, I honestly didn't know much about Achua before he ended up being drafted, but I mean just looking at that Christmas matchup against New Orleans, he did play pretty solid. How many points? I had the stats up. He had 11 points. He shot a pretty high percentage from the field. So yeah, I mean, I like him a part of the rotation, honestly. And I mean, if Eric Spoelstra can continue to give him those good minutes, and I feel like he'll be able to continue to produce at a high level.
Yeah. We spoke about a little bit about Golden State versus the. We spoke a little bit about Golden State from the Buck, and we also spoke about the Bucks a little bit too. One thing I did notice from this game is the Bucks, their front court depth. It's something that's going to be challenged throughout the regular season and the playoffs, and it might force Bud to play Giannis at backup center minutes more, which is something that a lot of people have wanted him to do, but he's been kind of resistant to doing. But the lack of a backup center, or at least a good backup center on the defensive end, is going to probably force Bud to play Giannis at the 5 more. So that's something I noticed. And just the Warriors just needing something to work for them. I also wrote in my notes that Steph wasn't being as aggressive. Like he was just looking like as I mentioned earlier, he was just looking for his teammates more. So hopefully that changes in their next game where he gets more aggressive. How'd you feel about that game?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just looking at the whole game, I mean, it was obviously a disaster for Golden State, just to say the least. And I mean, I know people like to kind of like clown on stuff, saying like, "Oh, he doesn't play well on Christmas Day," but you can kind of tell like this game, like he wasn't as aggressive as he needs to be, and you can tell like he's really trying to like help his teammates to really find a rhythm on the team as far as like chemistry and ball movement. So, and then also, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy as well because honestly, I mean, Giannis didn't really play that well of a game. I mean, he did have a double-double. He did have 15 points, but it was really just, guys like Chris Middleton, guys like Drew Holiday, and these other guys that continue to play at a high level. And because of that, it was able to be like a huge blowout. So Golden State definitely has some problems that need to be fixed soon. I mean, and I mean, we obviously said that when they in the beginning of the show when we were talking about them playing against Brooklyn, but to be able to lose by like 39 points when Giannis wasn't really playing up to his level, like it really just shows like there's some issues that really need to be adjusted, and I hope Steve Kerr really looks at his team and like really figures out like what he needs to do to help these guys compete at least on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Middleton looked great in that game, and he just looks great overall to start the season. Like he just looks more comfortable, especially in like ball handling duties more. Because I think now that the team doesn't really have a true point guard to start, they kind of let Middleton do some more ball handling duties, which is interesting to see because it's something that we saw glimpses of in the past, and it wasn't something that was featured a lot, but it's something that's being featured a lot more. Because Drew isn't necessarily a true point guard, so they don't necessarily have one in the starting lineup to play alongside them. So that was interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's crazy though as well because I mean, I didn't even look at it from that perspective of Milwaukee not having a point guard, like a true point guard that's able to run the floor for them. I mean, and it kind of, I guess you could say it kind of puts them in the same position that the Clippers are in as far as like not having a point guard. But I feel like with the the way that Giannis has the ability to like really be that floor general and like be able to facilitate on the offensive end, I guess it does kind of make up for like for loss of a true point guard. But I mean, but like you said, I mean, Chris Middleton has continued to just emerge throughout the first part of the season. And he honestly looks like him. He's not stopping either because I mean the jump shot is flowing for him. He's able to get good looks at the 3-point line, mid range game, and it's obviously working for him. So they definitely need to continue to look for him going forward. And I know for a fact that Coach Bud will definitely like keep him in the flow of things as the season goes on.
Yeah, for definitely. And with the next game that came up was Boston and Brooklyn. We kind of spoke about that a little bit with like Brooklyn having Kevin Durant come back, still easing his way back into full strength. One thing for Boston, they lack some depth. Like I don't know how they've had all these assets over the years, but it's resulted in like little depth that they have now. I mean, they're having to play Peyton Pritchard actual minutes. Who else did they give minutes to? They had to play their rookies, which is something that we don't necessarily see from Boston, especially the last couple of years. So that's one thing that troubles me about Boston, and if they can get far in the playoffs. And the Kemba knee injury is concerning as well because it was an issue in the bubble, and they had him rest, and then he played in the playoffs. He did not look good, and here he is again to start this season. Not playing, and it's concerning. So how do you feel about the Celtics and just like Kemba overall?
I've honestly said this like before the season even started. Like I just felt like Boston didn't do enough in the offseason like to really elevate their team as far as like being in the Eastern Conference. And I know they've been to the conference finals with this young ball club like 2 of the last 3 years, but I feel like now with a team like Milwaukee, who's obviously has a chip on the shoulder looking to come back this year, and also Brooklyn having Kevin Durant and Kyrie healthy coming back, and not to mention teams like Philadelphia with a new head coach and pretty much a new system over there, I just feel like Boston didn't do enough to really help their team. And I know they had a signing of Tristan Thompson, which really does help. But like you said, I mean, the loss of Kemba does also hurt for them as well. I mean, and you could tell like he could have made a really big difference last night against Brooklyn, going up against Kyrie. But yeah, I mean, just looking at this roster, I mean, it's kind of crazy how like they're continuing to play. They played Peyton Pritchard 25 minutes. They played Grant Williams 18 minutes, Semi Ojeleye 14 minutes. So yeah, I mean, they're really having to rely on their younger assets to really like step in and like kind of like keep the pace going off the bench for the team. And you could tell it's really hurt them against Brooklyn. So. Hopefully, like throughout the season, Coach Brad Stevens will possibly make some adjustments, and hopefully, like with Kemba coming back sometime in January, it'll definitely like make them a better team.
Yeah, they might have to pull some moves at the trade deadline. I don't know. Maybe they might have to trade one of the rookies that they have, one of their younger players that is not getting much run, like Carson Edwards or Romeo Langford, maybe. But they're going to have to do something to fix that issue that they have with the depth, because right now to start this season, as I mentioned before, when Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown, when one of them is out when he's not on the court, it's just the offense just stifles, and there's not much creation there's not much shot creation happening. It's a lot of Jason Tatum ISOs and whatnot. So I mean, he can score on a good percentage of them, but it isn't necessarily the best shot that you're getting in the offense.
Definitely. So. Like, what kills me with Tatum as well is that, I mean, we know how gifted he is offensively, but there have been many times when he's in those isolation possessions, and then it's like he just has the ball too long and he's not making a play. Like, he's just dribbling. And then by the time it's like, 7 seconds go by, 8 seconds go by, and then it's like now we're just waiting on him to make a play. Like, okay, are you going to shoot the ball? Are you going to look for an open man? So that's something that like he needs to improve on, like, going forward to the season, like really just like, making a quick move with the ball in his hands, because I feel like, with him having the ball too long in his hands, it's gonna like force into a bad shot or possibly a turnover. So it's definitely an improvement that needs to happen.
Yeah, one thing, Jason Tatum is one of my favorite players, but one thing I don't like seeing him do is he dribbles for like 12 seconds just to do a sidestep three. when like you can get to the basket, get you some fouls, get some free throws maybe, or just find another man. I mean, he like you said, he spends way too much time dribbling, and he makes the game more difficult for himself. And I feel like that's something him and like that's something him and Paul George have in common, where they make the game too difficult for themselves. They like to showcase their bag a bit too much. And it's just like, bro, just settle for the easy shot, and the offense will come to you so much easier at that point.
Especially, I mean, and especially like with him like going into like 6'10", is like, you know, he has an advantage over like the majority of like players at that small forward, power forward position. So it's like, you know, you shouldn't really have to take that much time into like getting into your shot. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like whether you post up or whether, you know, isolation plays, like, you know, be able to like just make a quick move, whether it's being able to get to the basket, whether it's being able to take a step back three or a step back mid-range shot, or even like passing the ball open. Like, I just feel like, you know, with him being able to like to make a quick play as the best player on the team, it'll really help the Celtics as a whole. Like, you know, it really help elevate their play on offense.
Yeah. One and going on to the Mavericks versus Lakers game. Lakers, their offense definitely has improved and their bench depth has improved, but their defense has taken a hit, of course, with guys like Dennis Schroeder. They're not really regarded for their defense, as well as Montrezl Harrell. Marc Gasol is kind of not living up to what Lakers fans expected from him, because they thought that they were going to get someone who's going to be great on defense and be able to hit some threes. So far, he's been able to just like really just play make for them. Again, we already spoke about the Mavs, and the last thing I've noticed about the Nuggets to kind of close things off with the Christmas Day games, the Nuggets really miss Grant and Craig with someone who could defend the wings, because we saw Paul George and Kawhi, they basically had their way with the Nuggets out there, and guys like Grant and Craig, they were the guys that you had defending them. Michael Porter Jr., he gives you stuff on offense, and he's improved his defense a little bit, but it hasn't really improved to the point where you're like trusting him to guard Kawhi and Paul George for extended periods of time. Same, Will Barton's a solid perimeter defender, but are you going to trust him on Kawhi and Paul George like you did with Grant? So, like, I feel like that's going to be the main factor of what contributes to, along with Jamal Murray's progression, that's what's going to contribute to the Nuggets, how deep they go into the postseason. So how do you feel about that?
I definitely agree with you. I kind of hated to see Grant go, because I just feel like, you know, especially like in the bubble in the playoffs, he was like a really valuable player for the team, especially against the Clippers in the second round, and then also a little bit against the Lakers as well in the conference finals. So I think with him not being on the team, it does take a hit on the defensive end, but not only that, but I mean just like production off the bench as a whole. But it's like, you know, I guess it's like, you know, who do you want guarding Kawhi and Paul George? Like, you know, I mean, and like you said, do you expect Michael Porter Jr. to be able to do it on a consistent level? Do you expect him to like really use his size to make things difficult for both of those guys? I feel like he has the capability of doing it, but he's going to have to really step up and really like show more effort to make that necessary on the defensive end. But yeah, I mean, just looking at the team as a whole, I mean, the Nuggets are definitely still looking to find themselves, especially like, you know, after having a terrific bubble experience and now going back to, you know, playing in home arenas. I just think that, you know, they're really still trying to find themselves as a collective, and you could tell like it's really took a toll on them, because I mean, in all honesty, I mean, many people expected them to blow out Sacramento, but obviously that didn't happen, and they didn't really make this Clippers game very competitive until like probably late in the fourth quarter, when they kind of like mounted a small comeback, but it didn't last long. So yeah, I mean, just going like deep into the season, Denver's really gonna have to like really find that identity and like really find a way that they can make things happen going forward.
Yeah, things haven't looked good for the Nuggets, and man, I was just so upset. Like you, I was so pissed to see Grant go and to go to the Pistons out of all teams. It's like, oh man, he kind of ruined a great thing that they had, because if they kept Grant going, then you can slowly still ease Michael Porter Jr. into the role that you want him to be. You don't have to thrust him onto these wings. Same thing with Craig. They basically let Craig go for nothing too. I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's weird how Denver let both those guys just go like that. But they did match Grant's offer. Grant just wanted a bigger role. I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing for him, but
Yeah, I'm not really too high on him being in Detroit. I do understand that the fact that he does want a higher role, especially with the way that he played last year. But he was honestly in a really good position to possibly win a championship, and I just feel like now with him being in Detroit, I mean that's honestly not going to happen.
all right. So before we end things, the 2017 rookie class, a lot of them got their extensions, and some of them did not. Luke Kennard got 4 years, 64 mil. Fultz got 3 years, 50 mil. Isaac got 4 years, 80 mil. OG got 4 years, 72. Derek White got 4 years, 73 mil. The guys who didn't get extended were Lonzo, John Collins, Markkanen, Allen, Dennis Smith Jr., of course, and like some other guys. But how did you feel about who got contracts and like their amounts and like who didn't get extended? I know John Collins recently, they said he declined the $90 million extension from the Hawks because he wanted more. So how do you feel about all that?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure why John Collins turned that down, but maybe
Yeah,
maybe there's
you don't turn down a bag like that.
exactly. I mean, especially like with him still being so young, and it's like, but hey, I mean, maybe there's something. Maybe Atlanta can make something happen in the future. So maybe he kind of sees ahead. But I think the one person I'm really happy for is Markelle Fultz, especially like with the way that his career started, and him
Oh
really
yes, definitely.
him being able to like really find a home in Orlando. I think that really helps him as far as like where his career can go, longevity, and Orlando obviously shows that that they want to continue to be to have him as their starting point guard long term with signing that extension. So I don't know, man. Maybe he did have a good season last year, but now it's really all about like how he's able to continue this going forward. So now it's really up to him to see like where he really goes as far as like being like a really like valuable point guard on Orlando.
Yeah, I was really happy for Markel Fultz as well because I mean, like you said, the way his career started, it just felt like it was so like he had so much promise. He was the number one overall prospect, and like and then all of the shoulder stuff happened, and then the whole thing with the Sixers. It was just a mess. And I'm glad he got out of Philly and was able to find a home in Orlando and is getting paid. One of the more intriguing names that was, of course, John Collins, because you just don't turn down a bag like that. And Lonzo Ball betting on himself. I feel like he's definitely going to get paid, especially if he continues the trajectory that he's been going on. He's been progressing really well the last couple of years. His jump shot definitely has improved. I would like to see him go to the rim a bit more because I think teams, they know that he doesn't want to go to the rim, so they kind of game plan for that. But other than that, I feel like he's been pretty solid, and I feel like he'll get himself a decent payday, especially seeing how other guys like Kennard got paid and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I definitely agree. To be honest, I wasn't necessarily surprised with Lonzo not getting that extension, just because I feel like in all honesty, Lonzo's a really talented player. I just want people to know that right away. But
mhm.
the one thing that I'm concerned with him is his assertiveness. Is like sometimes he looks as if he's not really engaged into the game, and it's like for a guy with that amount of talent and a guy that many people expected to really shine after his great career at UCLA, we really expected more out of Lonzo. I don't know about superstar caliber, but I mean, he can honestly be a very valuable point guard. He's a great floor general. He's very athletic. He can get to the rim when he wants to. So it's all about him being able to take that extra step as far as being a very assertive player on both ends of the floor. And I feel like if he's able to do that, not only will he allow himself to have an opportunity to get more money, but it'll also help the Pelicans as a whole. Because I mean, the Pelicans are a team that many expect to make the playoffs this year, and I feel like with Lonzo possibly being that guy, maybe not the third leading scorer right behind Zion and Brandon Ingram, but to be able to really be a valuable player as the point guard, I feel like it'll really elevate them, as they're trying to push for a playoff seed.
Yeah, definitely. In my season preview, I actually had the Pelicans as like possibly a play-in team because I wasn't confident in their spacing, and that was like my main issue with them was just their spacing. Because as we saw in the Christmas Day game, it's just not something that is present at the moment. But we'll see how it goes as the season goes on. As we wrap things up here, thank you, Nick, for coming on to the podcast. Hopefully, we can collaborate again in the future. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at _Nick. Follow my podcast on Twitter at ATR Pod. I do a lot of basketball content, like pretty much all over the internet. So yeah, just check me out from there. You never know what I'll be able to talk about next.
All right, and definitely make sure you guys, if you're watching on the YouTube page, make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to be consistent with the uploads there. Leave a like, rating, subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a rating, share with your friends, all that good stuff. Make sure you check out the links in the show notes. I got all links to my content, and I'll have links to Nick's content as well. And that's it.